Welcome to the In Dreams Our Monster season at the Birmingham Electric Cinema. We're delighted to welcome the lead programmer for the season, Jean Stanton. Jean, warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
The In Dreams Our Monster season, through the BFI, looks at a wide range of horror figures, from zombies, beasts, witches and vampires, but you've specifically chosen to focus on the werewolf, and I wondered why you feel this is such a significant horror figure.
Well, I think there's something very ancient and primal about the werewolf that's rooted in our national psyche. For me, it's the scariest of the monsters. You know, it has this superhuman strength. You can't outrun it. It has these huge sharp teeth and claws, and all it wants to do is rip you apart. And then the scariest thing, that in the morning it reverts to its human form, and it's full of remorse. And I think we find that really quite frightening, because that's something we can all relate to. We've all done things in the heat at the moment, or wanted to, and we're afraid of what we might be capable of if we did unleash the beast within. So that's very much our shadow side, and I think it's something that everyone can relate to.
Well, talking of the beast within, we start the season with a classic shapeshifter narrative, which is Cat People from 1942. Why did you choose this as the opening title for the season?
Well, it is a classic. It's beautifully shot, very atmospheric, absolute masterclass in suspense, as you would expect from a producer such as Bal Luton and a director such as Jack Turney. But our focus is on female shapeshifters, and it's the character of Irina, played by Simone Simon, that's such an iconic character and a very complex one. So she's a foreigner. She's from a small village in Serbia, and she's now living in a very modern New York. But she feels and is seen to be treated as an outsider. And we see her, she falls in love, but she can't commit herself because she's worried that she's subject to this curse, and she feels that she'll turn into an animal when her passions are aroused. And we wonder, you know, will that really happen? Will she turn into a cat, or does she need professional help? You know, and should we feel sympathetic towards her? You know, we don't know a lot about her other than where she came from. We don't know her backstory. You know, has she turned into a cat before? You know, what has happened? And I think as well, the film, it's interesting. So this is the shapeshifter of the season. All the others are werewolves. But this is a cat, and a cat is always sort of seen as being very feminine, but sometimes in a derogatory way. So we talk about spiteful women are catty, or when women fight, it's a cat fight. There's the association of women with witches, and I just wonder, you know, it's interesting what the film is saying about women at that time with that association.
Fascinating sort of response there as well. Two things to reflect on, I think, and I think it's a brilliant film to start the season with. First of all, obviously Jacques Tourneur was also an outsider, an émigré director, and I wonder if that sort of reflects that sort of sentiment you talk about. And also, of course, you know, alongside horror movies, his other great sort of genre work was often in film noir, with those masculine fears around the unknowability of womanhood. So it's a brilliant start. The season then moves on to sort of focus on a number of British entries to werewolf cinema, and I just wondered if you could briefly talk us through some of those entries and why you think they're significant examples of national cinema.
Okay, so the native wolf has been extinct in the British Isles since the 18th century, but before that it was a very successful predator that killed people's livestock, and very much a beast to be feared. And so cautionary tales were told, and they become part of folklore, and they've been handed down sort of in that tradition. And I think that's most strikingly evident in Neil Jordan's The Company of Wolves, which of course was also co-scripted by Angela Carter from her own short stories, sort of those dark fairy tales. It's a film that focuses around Granny telling these stories to her daughter, and it follows in that oral folk tradition.
Absolutely. So the Company of Wolves is a classic sort of film that's in the season. I've got to move on to a second British entry you've got here, a wonderful Amicus title, The Beast Must Die. So talk us through why The Beast Must Die.
The Beast Must Die. More than anything, this is a good, fun movie with its famous werewolf break. It's very much in that Agatha Christie whodunit sort of style. But again, I think a lot of the British werewolf films are rooted in the British landscape. So it's a film it's the hunter and the hunted, and it's set in the woodland, and then we've got the big mansion house, and it's a little bit sort of in that kind of scary ghost story, and that sort of tales around the campfire that we're so good at, I think.
I'm really looking forward to that screening. I'm a big Amicus fan, and so that's going to be a real treat. Moving on to your final British entry for the season, we've got Dog Soldiers, Neil Marshall's film, a firm cult film favourite. Why did you feel it was worthy of inclusion?
Okay, so Dog Soldiers, I think, is interesting. A lot of people think of this as it's a very masculine film. It's dog soldiers, it's all it's all these guys, but we also forget there is the zoologist in there, who sort of quietly plays a very pivotal role in the film. And again, it's set in Scotland. You've got that woodland. Again, it's hunter, hunted, and there's this and that remoteness to it, that little cottage in the woods, and that isolation and being trapped. And I think that's sort of a thread that runs throughout all the films.
Well, as I say, there's some great British films in there, but you've also got some sort of, I guess, really cult classics, crowd pleasers as well. And I'm particularly thinking we've got the seminal werewolf film, The Howling, directed by Joe Dante from 1981. Why do you think the film has stood the test of time, and what's specific or special about this screening?
Well, I think it's a very good example of 80s horror. Again, it's in a very sort of urban, male-dominated landscape in the city. It's set in the world of broadcasting. But then it moves again into sort of remote backwoods, and you've got this very strange group of outsiders, one of whom is John Carradine, which has to be a plus in anyone's book. And it's got this fantastic slow build, some genuinely terrifying, really iconic moments in there, which if you've seen it, I'm sure you will never forget. And again, just fantastic special effects. But what I particularly like about it is I feel it's sort of at that crossroads between sort of the classic and modern horror. You've got the central character of Karen, who's a reporter played by Dee Wallace. Again, works in this very male world of broadcasting. But it's interesting how she's treated by men in the film. She's very much sort of seen through the male gaze, if you like, and she's sort of soft and vulnerable, but really she's anything but. And what I also find interesting is how it's set in this world of broadcasting, and it's very much about how, in a way, it's kind of that almost like the modern. It's that storytelling aspect again. So where we used to tell these stories around the campfire, now we tell them on the screen. But it's interesting with The Howling how it's all about business and it's numbers and it's about entertainment. And I think that's almost ahead of itself. This was before social media or the internet, and that's very much how it is today. It's how do you cut through the noise? How do you make people take notice of that. So I think it's a fantastic, frightening, film that anyone can enjoy, a real romp through the woods. But I think it's got a lot to say about society today and women's place in society today.
I think that's a particularly interesting point. I mean, if we reflect back on where Joe Dante came from, he was a protege of Roger Corman. And there was a lot of kind of particularly feminist criticism around how Roger Corman's independent underground guerrilla outfit were advancing a kind of countercultural kind of mode of filmmaking. So it's fascinating. Yeah. You've read that, it's almost like a critique of 80s commercialism in there. I mean, moving on, in a way, gender and sexuality and womanhood has run through your programming rota here. And we move on to a specifically Canadian example of the werewolf, which is, of course, the incredible Ginger Snaps, directed by John Fawcett, written by Karen Walton. And you've sort of flagged this up as one of the highlights of the season. Why do you think this remains such a significant example of werewolf cinema?
Well, I find it hard to believe that this is a film is nearly a quarter of a century old, because it's as fresh and raw and scary and relevant as it was then. So you've got the focus, it's on two death-obsessed sisters. They are complete outsiders, and one of whom is bitten by a werewolf, and she starts to see changes in her body and behaviour, much to the horror of her sister and the college students that she doesn't get on with very well. Morbidly beautiful film, very modern. And I think the thing about it is it just captures what it feels like to be a teenage pubescent girl just perfectly. And I love that the focus is on Ginger, who's a werewolf, and the audience is on this journey with her. And it's frightening and it's overwhelming for her what's going on, all these changes that's taking place. She can't make sense with what's happening to her. And I think that's just something that every teenage girl can relate to. She's committing these horrific acts, and we're with her. The sympathy is with Ginger. We understand what's going on, and I think if the Company of Wolves sort of started that tradition of young girl turning into woman, the changes and so on. So if that started it off, I think Ginger Snaps takes that and just runs with it. As to a couple of other films that we have in the season, we've got the Danish horror When Animals Dream, and also Wildling with Belle Parry and Liv Tyler, and again they focus on sort of young women and changes and sort of that allegory with the beast. And I think a lot of women can relate to that, I think.
Well, I'm really looking forward to this season. You've got 9 screenings. It's worth saying you've got exclusive filmmaker Q&As. So we've got exclusive filmmaker Q&As with Joe Dante and the creators of Ginger Snaps and the ever excellent film critic Kim Newman. You've also got film scholar introduction. So there's a heck of a lot going on. How can people find out more? Okay, so if you go to our website, it's electricbirmingham.com, and if also on social media, we are on Facebook, Electric Birmingham, and Twitter, it's at electricbham. And we'd love to hear from you. We're really looking forward to this season. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.